So let's get started. Hey, everybody. Thank you for joining us today as we tackle the state of the market and specifically look at industry and consumer trends and how you can put some of these learnings into practice as marketers. Quick reminder, we hold a new session each month, so just be on the lookout for more to come. All right, so today you have the privilege of hearing from two experts at Ground Truth. We have Malcolm Johnson, one of our senior AEs, and myself, of course, Dan Silver, and I'm SVP of Marketing. And before we get in, just some quick housekeeping notes. One, we've muted all participants during the webinar, and we'll be sending out a recording to all attendees post-event. During the session, you can submit questions at any time through the Q&A function on the webinar, on the Zoom link. And we will make sure to answer all those questions at the conclusion of the content. Also, just please take our quick feedback poll at the end of the webinar so we can continue to improve. And finally, if you have any follow-up questions, feel free to email us at adexpert@groundtruth.com. All right. So today's webinar, we're going to give you a quick introduction first to who Ground Truth is. We'll then dive into some of the consumer trends and recent shifts in behavior. And then we'll talk about how you can put these new strategies into action. And after that, we'll answer some of your questions and we'll let you get back to work. All right, so let's start. And before we get into consumer trends and strategies to take advantage of them, it's important to understand a little bit more about Ground Truth and what we've been building here for the last decade plus. So at a high level, Ground Truth is a location-based marketing and advertising technology company. The three areas that we value more than anything else are scale, performance, and trust. And I'll get into our technology next, but fundamentally what Ground Truth has been building is predictive targeting products that leverage real-world visitation and movement data. And at Ground Truth, we often talk about how where you go physically in the real world says more about you than your digital online habits. And that's really the context that we're talking about here. Serving more relevant ads based on where you are or where you've been. And it's this context that we call visitation data that is really the unique value that we're able to leverage and build these products off of. So how do you accurately capture visitation data? And this is essentially a three-pronged process to ensure that when we classify a visit, it's a true and verified visit. So it starts with having a precise base mapping platform. And we actually had to build this ourselves, as most available mapping data traditionally was not made for marketing purposes. They were more made for things like providing driving directions. So we said, what do we really need to understand in a mapping layer to capture visitors and build audiences off of? Well, we knew we needed to understand, we knew we needed to accurately map the walls of businesses and key POIs like stadiums and museums, et cetera. So we obviously needed to define the boundaries really, really precisely, but we also wanted to understand and separate the parking lot and also what we call the retail area, which is really any business within essentially a shopping mall, so walking distance without having to cross roads. We felt these were three valuable layers for us to build data off of. The second step is vetting and filtering location data derived specifically from GPSs of mobile devices. And this helps us understand at a high level, is the location that we're receiving signals from, which is a lat-long coordinate, actually where it says it is? And this is a detailed process that we have a patent on. So now that we have the map to provide the context of where and the accurate device signals, lastly, to get accurate visitation data, we need to understand if a visit actually occurred. So what do we mean by that? Well, we look at things like dwell time. How long was the device actually there? We look at device speed to make sure that this wasn't a passerby. We look at and filter out employees. Do we see them there 5 days a week, for example? And then store hours. Did the visit take place during a store's business hours? And, there's a lot of other variables, but finally, after all of that, you have visitation data. And since this is really a new form of data, at Ground Truth, we perform annual audits to verify and validate the accuracy of our visits. And we do that with a company called Numerator, where essentially we match our data with verified receipt data, so purchase data. We've done this every year for the last 5 years, and we release it to the public. This past year, it was verified at 96.2% accurate, but important to note that the 3.8% was simply unable to be verified. Regardless, we're talking about an extremely high level of confidence in this data set. And again, it's this visitation data that allows us to reach and measure consumers in key moments or build really differentiated audiences from. Okay, you're all experts now. So let's get into some key consumer trends and shifts that we're seeing in the market. And obviously, a lot of changes have taken place over the last 12 months, and they've taken place rapidly. And while some may be temporary, there are also key indications that some are going to simply be new normals. So first, which should come as no surprise, time spent on digital accelerated this past year, increasing 12%. Traditional media also grew, but the real winner here was mobile, with consumers spending just shy of 4.5 hours a day on their devices. So a lot of consumption taking place. From a behavioral standpoint, the disruptive impact of COVID-19 on everyday life has also increased the adoption of several new or growing trends like click and collect and grocery delivery. So convenience has really taken a primary role in how consumers want or even need to purchase. Click and collect sales specifically has grown a remarkable 60+%. But this is not a COVID outlier. It's a COVID accelerated trend, as convenience will continue to play a big role in consumption going forward. Here's a very simple way to look at it, and I love this illustration. We used to think two-dimensionally, right? On the left. So you had the in-store shopper and you had the online shopper. Then you had that subset, that Venn diagram slice of omni-channel shoppers. But now it's a lot more diverse. So the elements of immediacy and effort making up the Y and the X axis really start to show how some of these new trends fit in. So on the top right of the quadrant, you have in-store shopping, and at the bottom left, you have your traditional order online standard delivery. But things like buy online, pick up in store, order online, curbside pickup, order online, same day delivery. The choices of convenience are becoming more and more important and more complex. So as the boundaries of offline and digital continue to blend, providing flexible shopping options can really help open up more doors and fill more online carts. We ran a study last year trying to understand the value of a visit when compared to a non-visit as it relates to total sales, so omni-channel sales. In other words, when someone sees an ad, visits a store, how does that impact both in-store and online sales? What we found was that those who made an in-store visit after being impressed with a location-based ad were 43% more likely to make a purchase from that retailer either in-store or online. But perhaps more interesting than that, a store visit results in a 25% increase in likelihood of buying from that retailer online. And I think this greatly illustrates the true impact that physically visiting a store has on online shopping, and something not widely known by marketers. So with the uncertainty that clouded much of last year, companies that were able to quickly innovate with a customer-first approach were able to find new ways to limit the harsh economic impacts of the pandemic. digitally savvy brands with existing virtual operations, like app integrations with meal delivery companies and contactless pickup logistics in place before the pandemic, were able to ramp up quickly to meet the needs of their customers. 2020 proved the benefit of physical locations having a digital presence and customer-driven solutions, and this will continue to be critical in 2021. What's another trend that will potentially stick? The volume of telehealth visits made up almost 70% of doctors' visits at the beginning of the pandemic. And while this percentage slowly dropped, you can see what increased consumer confidence in these new behavioral vehicles could likely have on the future of healthcare. Another big trend that we're seeing is with brand purpose. So staying home has started to open up people's eyes to how business impacts more than just their bottom lines. In fact, 89% of Americans are more likely to support a brand earning a profit if they also have a positive impact on the world. And this is particularly strong globally. Oops, poll popping up. In the younger demographics, with Gen Z and millennials actually supporting purpose-driven brands around 11% more than Gen Xers. And for purpose-conscious consumers, supporting businesses within their communities and promoting overall economic health of their local communities has skyrocketed. And this was particularly true for restaurants that were closed to in-person dining. Alternative methods like drive-through or carry-out and delivery all became crucial to supporting local businesses. In Q2 last year, we saw drive-through visits increase 26%, making up 42% of all restaurant visits during that time frame. We believe supporting local communities will continue to be a priority for consumers in 2021 as the country begins to rebound economically. Focusing on establishing regular communications around store hours and operating procedures, as well as having a strong local community presence, can help acquire first-time customers and increase visits from your loyal customers. So understanding demand and how quickly retailers and brands are adjusting at the national, regional, and local levels is more important than ever. And this is a quick snapshot of our public foot traffic dashboard, which Malcolm will get into in his next section. But it's something that you can all access for free on our website. And in it, you can look at business categories and public places all the way down to the zip code level. But you can see in this snapshot, and this is a view of November 2020 through January 2021, we're starting to see some normalization in some of these key categories. So you see I have grocery, home improvement, mass merch, QSR, retail. QSR and grocery are inching their ways back to normal, but you can also see the typical Black Friday and pre-holiday retail foot traffic spikes that we're used to, highlighted in green. And a little smaller these spikes were, but they're starting earlier in the past. But looking at the trends, this is a key indicator that we will continue to see this same type of behavior in the future. So lastly, let's talk about working from home. And even work-life balance is altering behaviors. So people's day-to-day lives have been upended, right? 33% of US workers were working from home full-time as of September 2020. And when you study location day in and day out like we do, you realize how truly regular our behavioral patterns are. They're pretty boring, in fact. Most people have routines. They don't visit too many places on a regular basis, and they're pretty consistent in these patterns. But now, where they get their coffee, eat lunch, and even buy their groceries, that's changed. And so how do we make those purchases, how we make sense of those purchases has also changed, and the frequency of those purchases has changed. Likewise, opportunities for remote work led to an increase in residential moves, some temporary, while some were permanent. But we have statistics from Pew Research that found that a staggering 1 in 5 U.S. adults either moved or knew someone else who did move during the pandemic. And with remote work and with the growth of it, this moving trend is definitely expected to continue. So while it's too early to know the full impact of an increased remote workforce and on real estate, both residential and commercial, one thing that we can be sure of is that daily routines have changed. And whether a person no longer commutes, has moved to a new city, new state, or is finding new work-life balance, routines have been disrupted. And brands can lean into these changes as consumers build new habits, as consumers build new habits and can grow their loyalist audience and gain market share from competitors by leveraging these shifts to reach shoppers during the right moments. So now I'm going to pass it over to Malcolm Johnson to explain how you can put some of these learnings into action.
Awesome. Thanks for that pass over, Dan, and great presentation. Want to do a quick check-in here just to remind everyone that any questions that come up or came up during Dan's presentation or will come up during the products overview, to please just drop them in the Q&A section of Zoom. It's all the way to the right, kind of in that bar at the bottom of the screen, instead of the chat, just because that will allow us to aggregate them all in the same place and address them all at the end of the presentation. So without further ado, I'd love to get into the ways in which we can take the learnings from Dan's presentation and put them into action with specific ground truth products. Before we get into a lot of the more advanced changes that we've made within our product suite, I wanted to basically give an overview of the available products and the ways in which that they are still relevant for the changing consumer world that we're seeing right now with COVID. So first 3 main ones would be location targeting, audience targeting, and weather targeting. So fairly straightforward. Location targeting basically means reaching people where they are in the moment. Audience targeting is reaching people based off of their past visitation behavior. And weather targeting is going to be reaching people based off of weather in the moment or in the forecast. So the first option is basically location targeting. And the ways that this presents within the Ads Manager platform are 3 main segments. One is going to be proximity, second on-premise, third neighborhoods. So for proximity targeting, you can see this image on the left of the screen. You're basically seeing a circle drawn over essentially a pin on the map. Many people, when they come to Ground Truth and maybe know a little bit about the space that we work in, will think of this as a geofence, and that's generally what it's known as kind of across the industry or people who are newer to the space. This basically allows you to reach people whose lat-long coordinates from their mobile device are within a fence that you draw essentially on a map, where you put in an address or a lat-long coordinate and you've decided a size of a fence that you'd like surrounding that. Maybe it's a mile or half mile, and you reach consumers within that fence. This tactic is generally used to cover broader areas or to cover not necessarily a specific store, but maybe a specific neighborhood or region where you find a high value audience or group of consumers. So for instance, if you're a retail store, you know that a lot of your customers come from one specific, maybe high income neighborhood within your market area. You could drop an address in that neighborhood and decide on a size fence you'd like surrounding it. Same tactic goes for some different strategies. If there's a big walking area where you know a lot of consumers frequent, or perhaps a field or a public park, somewhere where you don't have the exact store to target someone in, but you know the area that they are currently in, this allows you to reach them there. The second is on-premise targeting, and this is using the coordinated system of blueprints that Dan explained earlier in the presentation, which allows you to target consumers in the exact boundaries of stores. So in this example, you can see the area in green would be an exact retail store. Let's say that it's a Target store for the case of this example. And then the area in red that's highlighted there is going to be basically the surrounding retail and the lot outside. This enables you to reach shoppers when they're actually visiting a store to reach them in the moment. So a great example for this would be if you're a CPG brand, you have your products stocked in Target, you want to be able to reach people while they're actually inside of the store, so you can get them over to your area of the store where they maybe wouldn't have shopped there if you weren't able to reach them within that moment. The third one here is our neighborhoods targeting. And this is something that's very unique to Ground Truth's platform, where we basically observe visitation to POIs across the entire platform in order to build out trade areas that over-index at a high rate with that store. So again, we could say that this is a target in this example here where that green pin is dropped. The areas in red and orange surrounding that target are going to be areas that over-index at a high rate in terms of visitation. In more plain language, that means where people are going before and after shopping at that target, which gives you a really good indication of where your customers live, as well as where they frequent before and after going to your store. So this is a way to, instead of running a traditional proximity campaign like you would on the left, where you just draw, a mile or two fence surrounding your store, you're able to actually observe the areas that over-index at a quite high rate with your store to make sure that you're targeting those areas and not targeting areas where folks simply don't go to before and after visiting the store. The next type of targeting is going to be audience targeting, where we basically run these out in three different main ways. And again, audience targeting is going to be reaching consumers based off of their past visitation behavior. So as opposed to the examples I shared in the previous slide, where you're reaching folks based off of where they are now, shopping in a Target currently, or are currently within a mile of the store, or within a trade area of the store. This is going to be reaching folks based off of where they have visited previously. So the first option for location audience targeting is basically targeting people based off of a specific location that they have visited before. So that can either look like targeting a brand audience. So in the platform, we have a bunch of turnkey audiences that are available to be leveraged at any moment. Something like the Target audience or the Walmart audience basically comprises devices that have recently visited a Target store or a Walmart store. And then on top of that, you can layer on an additional location filter to just reach, for instance, Target shoppers within the Baltimore DMA or the Minneapolis DMA, or wherever you are trying to hone in on the market. The second way of targeting would be behavioral audience targeting. So this is, instead of just reaching a specific store, retailer, or brand, you're going to be reaching a consumer based off of their behavior. I think many of you probably have experience in other DSPs or self-service platforms where similar types of audiences are built out based off of online behavior. So perhaps a social platform will use data like what someone has liked on their platform or engages with online on their platform to build up that audience. We use a similar principle, except instead of looking at what someone has searched for online or liked on Facebook or Instagram, we look at the actual locations that they have visited in order to build out a behavioral profile of that consumer. So for instance, someone that shops at Target and Walmart and Kmart will be a big box shopper within our platform. That will be the behavioral audience that they fall in. Other examples could be someone who shops at Anthropologie, and let's say Ferragamo will be a luxury shopper within our platform. Someone who has recently been to a Kia and a Toyota dealership will be in market for auto. We've got over 100 of these built out within the platform, all based off of that kind of consistent behavioral profile based on visitation. And the last here would just be custom audience targeting. So this would be basically building out your own custom parameters for that audience. So a list of locations, maybe it's all of your competitors within a local area that you'd like to build an audience for, in addition to demographic details, so like the age of that audience, or if you can pull in any third-party data as well, So that could be people who have purchased from you before, people who are on your email list, et cetera. We can layer those into the solution as well. So now that we've kind of based you in the basic elements of ground truth targeting, I wanted to touch on some of the solutions that we have put in place specifically in the past year to address changing consumer behaviors in COVID. So these are three very important audiences that we have built out in order to address some of the changes that have arose within our industry. We call them our shelter-in-place audience segments. You can see the three of them listed out here. I'll just read out the first one. Our high movement shelter-in-place audience is comprised of individuals whose devices show that they are moving at or near pre-stay-at-home order activity levels. Moderate is going to be are trending upward and approaching pre-stay-at-home order activity levels, and low movement is going to be when your movement and your shopping behavior has been significantly suppressed relative to pre-stay-at-home orders. How this is actually used within the platform and the ways that this has actually made a difference for many advertisers who work with us is basically just making sure that you're reaching the correct consumer with the correct message in that moment. So someone who falls into the high movement audience is going to be someone that's life has been generally unchanged, at least in terms of consumer behavior during the pandemic, so basically since last March. So with that consumer, you can approach them similarly to how you did before stay-at-home orders went into place. So if you're CPG brand, your products are stocked in Target, you maybe don't need to filter out your creative to reach them with a curbside pickup message or with an e-commerce message or something that is going to be a little bit more sensitive to their comfort level with shopping, because you know that their behaviors have been somewhat unchanged and they're potentially going to be shopping in store, maybe checking out new products, not just going kind of in and out the way that someone in the low movement audience would be. Conversely, you're reaching someone in the low movement audience. Like Dan mentioned in his presentation, people are looking to align with brands in terms of their outlooks and are looking to help out their local community. And so it's very important for brands to be sensitive to how people have reacted to the pandemic. So if you're in the low movement audience, it generally means that your movement in this time has been suppressed by stay-at-home orders, and you're not as comfortable with maybe going in a store and hanging out for a while, or indulging in entertainment options or fitness options like you would have before the pandemic. And this basically means that if you're reaching that type of consumer, you potentially don't want to reach them with a message to check you out in the aisles of Target, because that person is a little bit more nervous about shopping there. Maybe they're making a list and just kind of getting in and out, or they're using the options like curbside pickup or e-commerce options that have really grown during this time. Next. So you can see here an example of how we've adjusted our blueprint system to accommodate drive-up and curbside pickup zones. So our blueprint stores are always differentiated. Our blueprints are always differentiated by store. So for instance, in a Target, we will draw out different boundaries over the Target, the Super Target, the pharmacy. I know sometimes there's Starbucks in a Target where we'll have a different boundary drawn up for that. In addition to that, we've added an additional layer for drive-up and curbside pickup zones. And this basically allows our advertisers to continue to observe visits and use those as a key metric, performance metric within our platform, so that they don't have to ignore customers who are just picking up in those curbside spots. Additionally, those curbside pickup spots are completely designated for people who have already converted online and are just picking up. So when you think about it, the conversion rate for curbside pickup is just about 100%, unless someone accidentally enters that zone, versus a Target, which generally has a very high conversion rate, but it's not quite 100%. Sometimes people just kind of go and window shop for a while. So if you were previously ignoring these as someone who visits your store, you're missing out on those key performance metrics, where if you're an agency or reseller and you're working with Target as the retailer, you really want to be showing them that you're impacting those sales as well. So this is something that Ground Truth has accommodated within our platform in order to address the changing consumer and conversion habits of our customers. For restaurants, so pivoting just from the retail side, we have pickup and delivery zones is an important innovation that we've made within our platform. It's very similar to the neighborhoods product, which I mentioned at the beginning of this presentation. We're basically, for restaurants now, the majority of their business has shifted towards pickup and delivery instead of dining in, especially I know we're based in New York, where indoor dining just really opened up last week, and it's quite cold, so people aren't eating outside anymore. So basically, our pickup and delivery zones show the areas surrounding a restaurant that over in terms of visitation. So the pin is kind of dropped right in the middle there, and then surrounding that green pin, there are these areas in orange and deeper red that represent the areas surrounding that restaurant that people go to before and after visiting the restaurant. So in this case, this chicken wings restaurant, traditionally would maybe only target a very hyper local area surrounding them because they don't want to waste ad impressions on people who are, seemingly too far away. In actuality, they have really, really good chicken wings. So people are willing to kind of make the trek, maybe come from 4 or 5 miles away. So this pickup and delivery zone option allows them to only reach their hyper local market and really tailor their creative to that specific market, but also use the existing location and visitation intelligence within our platform to strategically meet their customer exactly where they are. And finally, click to cart. So through a partnership with Smart Commerce that we have added on to our platform within the past year, we're able to accommodate click to cart shopping and messaging within banner ads. So especially if you are a CPG product stocked within a retailer like a Target, or if you are a retailer itself, we integrate with most of the large platforms. So both Target or Walmart, but also something like an Amazon, if it's just completely e-commerce, where you can basically cut out a few steps for the consumer. Like Dan mentioned, convenience has been a huge factor within changing consumer habits for the past year during stay-at-home orders, where people are less willing to kind of go out of their way to find a product or what they're looking for online. This allows you to get a product right in front of someone with a relevant creative message, cut out a few steps for them so they can be adding that product directly to their cart on your preferred e-commerce or shopping app or website. Go next. And finally, cross-device targeting. So as Dan mentioned in his presentation, we've seen a bump in media really of all types, especially mobile. What we've also seen a huge bump in this year is going to be Ctv usage. People are working from home, they're not commuting. There's a lot more leisure time because they're not engaging with their traditional entertainment or restaurants that they usually visit. So people are spending a lot more time on the couch watching TV at home. I know personally, I definitely am. So cross-device targeting has been an important innovation for us this year. We're basically able to use the high-value audience that we've identified on mobile and extend that audience across different inventory sources like desktop and CTV. We do this basically by matching the user's mobile ad ID to their unique ID on both desktop and CTV. And then strategically, this is used for instance, if you're reaching someone to change their cable service, let's say, you've identified a really high value audience via our mobile targeting, but being able to get them on desktop means that you can get them in a situation where they're maybe more likely to actually pull the trigger on a conversion of changing a service, something that maybe includes a little bit more research, there's a little bit longer funnel, a little longer sales cycle for them. And similarly, reaching someone on a connected TV device, first of all, allows you to reach them on pretty premium inventory where they're going to be on a large screen connected TV device, so a Samsung Smart TV or a Roku or an Xbox, where you're getting basically traditional commercial space, so it's going to be largely non-skippable or not skipped within the platform, and you can get a 15 or 30-second ad in front of them instead of a simple mobile banner. So if you have a longer brand message, if you're trying to align your values with your consumer values, or you're just trying to simply share a little bit more information about your product, being able to extend our inventory across both desktop and CTV allows you to reach your consumer in a much more comprehensive manner. And finally, the ground truth foot traffic tracker. So Dan did mention this in his presentation as well. It's something that I would definitely recommend checking out on our website. So if you go to groundtruth.com, you can find it basically through our marketing materials, but the ground truth foot traffic tracker breaks down visitation and consumer trends by vertical as well as by area. So you can see here, we're kind of checking out New York as a state. You can also go down to more zip code levels. And this will show you trends that have happened, in the past few weeks. It's updated constantly by our marketing team. And this allows you to observe trends as they're happening. So something like in March and April, stay-at-homers first came into place. And when we developed this foot traffic tracker in Q2 of 2020, we saw a huge decline in entertainment and in restaurants for that period. But we saw an actual increase in something like grocery. People were going to the grocery store more. Those sales went way up. Or something like alcohol and liquor stores was also popular at that time. And then we've seen similar adjustments being made after that, for Q4 for holiday shopping. We saw definitely a big increase in retail. We've seen at various times increases in auto, with a lot of more people who traditionally relied on public transportation purchasing new vehicles. So this can give you a lot of insights on consumer behaviors that you perhaps didn't understand before or didn't see coming, and can allow you to strategically reach out to your clients and present media plans based off of that real world actionable data. And finally, Q&A. So if you have any additional questions that weren't answered in here, please continue to enter them in the Q&A section, and Dan and I will address them as they come up. In addition to that, I want to remind everyone that there is going to be a short poll that pops up at the end of this presentation. We'd really appreciate if you could give us any feedback so we can make sure that these presentations continue to be relevant and that we can share the best, most helpful information out there.
Okay. So I think there's a couple questions here. There's one question regarding iOS 14 and updates to privacy, which I would say just email us and we'll send you a detailed response. I think this webinar will be too long if we answer it right now. And I'll show you the email address in a minute again. The other question is about the shelter-in-place audiences. And let me just pull it up here. Evelyn, do we know the question specifically? I'm just trying to find it here.
I think I see it.
You have it?
Dan,
Okay.
so yeah, the question is, can you layer on the shelter-in-place audiences on top of other audiences? And the answer is yes, that you can. So if you were, trying to reach big box shoppers or luxury shoppers, you could, in addition to that, layer on the shelter-in-place audience so that you're only reaching big box shoppers who are in the high movement audience as well.
I think that's it, Malcolm. I think that means that we did a pretty good job here. So let me quickly just say thank you for joining us, and just reiterate that if you're interested in working together, if you have more questions, you can email us at adexpert@groundtruth.com. You could always visit our website. But thank you so much, and we hope to see you at future webinars.
Mac, actually, there were a couple of questions that come in.
Yeah, I just saw them.
Still going. All right.
Okay, so just a few more notes. It's great to have more questions. First one would be, can we send ads to people in a store without location enabled on their cell phone? So it takes a little bit to explain this. It has to do with whether or not we've identified that person in an audience previously. So short answer would be, we need someone's location enabled in one of the apps we partner with in order for us to know that they were in a store. We don't just kind of blindly guess based off of IP or other factors. The longer answer is that if we've already dropped that device into an audience based off of their past visitation, we hold on to that basically mobile ad ID, so we can then reach that user even if an ad request we receive doesn't have their location attached after, as long as that would fit within the parameters of the campaign. Second question, can you do that with self-serve? I assume that was referring to the shelter-in-place audiences. So the answer is yes. It's not available within the UI currently, I believe, but you would just get in contact with your platform specialist, and we could layer on and create those audiences for you. Third question, what are some strategies for gaining more foot traffic into a local restaurant? Really great question. Typically, the tactics that we'll run for restaurants are going to be heavily focused on audience targeting. So it definitely depends on what type of restaurant you're running with. We have different audiences built out for like QSR diners if you were more in the quick service space, or sit down diners if that was more the category that your restaurant fit into. And then my personal favorite tactic for restaurants that I highly recommend would be to identify competitors in your space and then build a custom audience based off of visitors to those restaurants. So if you know that within your town or your direct market area, you have 3 to 4 main competitors, we can drop them all into one location group, build an audience based off of the consumers or the diners who have visited those restaurants, and then impress them across both mobile, desktop, and CTV, and then track the visits back to your restaurant. That's the primary strategy that I would employ for that. Definitely some others that we could layer on as well in terms of targeting your neighborhood, so the areas surrounding you that over-index at a high rate with your restaurant, as well as targeting maybe just more broadly awareness-based to like your entire township or a mile or two surrounding your restaurant. And then as the campaign runs, we can optimize your spend towards the group that is generating the most visits. That's a pretty high level answer. There can get a lot more specific than that, but in terms of general strategy tips, those would be the tactics I recommend.
Awesome.
I think that's it.
Yeah. So again, just one last time, we'd appreciate your feedback via the poll. So once this is over, please just let us know. And thank you all for your time.